Hey boss, welcome back to Mocktails with Marina. I'm your host Marina, and today's episode is all about mentorship, teaching, and guidance. We're going to be discussing what makes someone a good mentor, what makes someone a bad mentor, and how should we be approaching these roles if you find yourself in one of them. Because let's be honest, if you are starting a business, if you are having any sort of original thought, you will likely find yourself in a position where someone wants to know what is it that special sauce is made of that you have that you can help them understand about themselves. So when you are in this situation, we want to make sure you're making the best of your possible choices, that you are making the best possible impression, and that you're leaving someone with a lifetime lesson of something that brings them to the next level rather than the other way around. So I'm going to try to ease your mind right away and say this. If you forget what it's like to be a student, it's really easy to be a terrible teacher. But if you are already in the practice of being a student, you're already very likely 10 steps ahead. I've met plenty of people who know a lot but can't teach for the life of them. That's because knowing something and teaching something are two very different skills. The best teachers are always the best students because when they are inside of someone else's program, they're not only aware of the new things that they're learning, but they're also aware of the feeling of what it feels like to struggle to grasp a concept. Being very present with understanding and recognizing that emotion helps you understand the battlefield of what's to come when people don't understand. When someone doesn't understand something, oftentimes they feel like there's some sort of confrontation. Some people feel triggered in certain ways. These types of students that feel triggered, you want to make sure you're not making them feel dumb. You're not making them feeling sad for missing out on knowledge prior. You don't want to make them feel angry for or frustrated for not picking up on something quickly enough. You want to be in tune with these emotions. You want to remember what struggle is so that you can not only define the subject that you're teaching, but you can describe struggle in and of itself to help them get through it. I personally make it a point to keep learning, whether that's through a mentorship, a mastermind, an app, even just listening to people who are ahead of me in the game, even if it's listening to podcasts, looking at other industries, seeing what other people are doing, whatever it takes to continue to be on the path of learning, because once you stop learning, you stop being able to teach effectively. You start talking at people instead of to people. And that is where a lot of mentors and teachers mess up. Now, a great teacher doesn't impress you with how much they know. A great teacher makes something so simple that a 5-year-old, a 5th grader, or a 15-year-old could understand exactly what's going on. I always ask myself, how do I explain this to someone who has never heard of it before, even if they have? And not in a condescending way, but as in, if I can't do that for myself, how on earth could I possibly explain this concept to anybody else? How could I confidently feel like I understand this concept as well as I do if I am unable to break it down into terms that make sense? Because at the end of the day, fundamental truths about life, whether it's reality, society, finance, whatever it is, oftentimes people like to do something called proof by intimidation, where they will add extra industry jargon, or maybe it's just the only language they know. It sounds like it's something that's unfamiliar, but in reality, once you translate it to the colloquial, everyday types of circumstances that you're used to, all of a sudden, rocket science doesn't seem like rocket science. Nuclear fission doesn't seem as difficult as nuclear fission. I'm not saying none of these things are complicated topics. What I'm saying is oftentimes people like to intimidate people into thinking that it's something more than it is, because it's some sort of lack of confidence, right? It's some sort of, oh, this is so big. Let me make sure you feel flustered by it because I feel flustered by it, and then therefore we're on the same page. A true mentor, leader, or teacher, when they approach something that they don't understand, they're going to let you know that they don't understand it. They're not going to try to put some sort of webbed cloth of deception over it to make it seem like it's more complicated so that you feel like it's not worth asking more questions, therefore questioning their ability to understand what's going on. Okay, so if you have ever struggled to explain your business and what you actually do to people, this is an action item you're going to want to consider today. Okay, so you're going to want to consider practicing your elevator pitch. You're going to want to consider practicing explaining to people without making it big. Maybe you need to find some poetry, some metaphors, some country song that helps you get through it. But regardless of the medium, you need to find a way to break down what you do into such simple terms that no one feels like they are above or below you. We're all just people here on earth trying to figure out which piece goes into which part of the puzzle. And just in case you need one more reason to make sure that you are very straightforward about how you are explaining things to people, if people are confused, they don't buy. If people are confused, they're not going to follow. If people are confused, they're just straight up not going to trust you. Now, just because you may have a hard time breaking things down in communications, have no fear, no worries at all. We don't expect, or you shouldn't expect, a mentor to be perfect. At the end of the day, if you expect a mentor to be flawless, you're setting yourself up for disappointment. Mentors are just people who've been through something before and can give you a little bit of insight from their experience. And you'd be surprised where you can find them. Some of my best mentors weren't even people who advertised themselves as mentors. Some were just people I watched closely, people I learned from by observing, basically watching them and how they moved through the world. But a good mentor does have good boundaries, so they shouldn't take advantage of you. They shouldn't be exchanging all of your time and labor for sake of experience or expertise unless there is an actual tangible end goal, end date, and end time. Very important to have these boundaries. And just as a good mentor shouldn't be taking advantage of you, you also want to keep the same type of energetic consideration in mind. Here's what I mean. You shouldn't expect any mentor, teacher, or guide to endlessly pour into you without giving something in return. So there is an exchange, right? Sometimes that exchange is money, sometimes it's labor, sometimes it's helping out in some other way. Sometimes it's just an equal energetic contract where you're bringing in as much value as you're taking. So it has to be balanced on both sides of the equation in order for it to make sense for you long term, right? And when you've learned what you came to learn, you can say thank you and you can move on. But I want to mention there are multiple kinds of mentorships that we find in life. Some we seek out, as we mentioned, right? Some we find in random places. So the ones that you seek out are typically the ones that tend to be your either, if we're talking short-term approach, we're talking very goal-oriented. If we're talking long-term approach, we're thinking more like transformational, like something you're walking in, and when you walk out of that mentorship, you are no longer the same person, or you don't carry the same energy in some way, shape, or form. Now, let's talk about the tough part, which I hate to say it, but the bad mentors, the bad teachers, the bad guides, they can ultimately give us some pieces of knowledge that we can move forward with in a very positive way. So I know that this is going to be a little bit of a difficult or triggering topic here, so let's just dive deeply straight into it. Because I know some of you who are listening to this, you might be thinking, I had a terrible mentor. They took advantage of me. They steered me wrong. They were selfish. I lost money. And it goes into this kind of external mode of like who this responsibility belongs to. And yes, there are some absolute frauds out there. It does happen. And it super sucks. But the hard truth is that you can learn from that too. So someone can be a bad teacher or a bad mentor, but that doesn't necessarily make you a bad student. Just because something didn't happen the way you anticipated it to doesn't mean that there isn't a cyclical lesson or a cyclical habit that you need to break. I've had teachers, bosses, and mentors who I would not imagine ever talking to again. But I cannot deny that they taught me something so fundamentally important and even helped shape who I am today. And for that, I am forever grateful. Sometimes the lesson itself isn't in what they intended to teach you, but it was absolutely valuable nonetheless. Pain is painful. There is absolutely no way around that, but pressure does make diamonds. And sometimes the worst experiences teach you what not to do, which is just as valuable as learning what to do. I am grateful for these lessons, even if I am disgusted with the mouths that they came from. So let's go ahead and bring this full circle. If you want to grow, if you want to expand, if you want to do something new, you don't have to do it alone. And in fact, you shouldn't do it alone. You should be seeking help. You should be seeking mentorship. The best businesses, the ones that don't fail in the first 5 years, are the ones that are not doing anything alone. They know how to outsource, delegate, automate. They know how to ask people how to do those things, even if they don't know how. They're not stuck in their own echo chambers. You can't learn that much from your own voice. I know that we want to. Some of us have a hard time connecting or reaching out to others for a variety of reasons. And in a world that can feel a little bit anxiety-ridden with new connections, because again, how do you know that someone out there isn't going to be a fraud? How do you know someone's going to actually teach you something that's actionable, helpful advice? What if you were to sign up for a program that's $10,000 and it doesn't go according to plan? That does feel scary. But what's so important that I want to stress so deeply here is that the greatest lessons that I've ever learned, even though I've paid for tens of thousands of dollars worth of mentorship just over the last few years alone, the clicking of the button to say, yes, I'm worthy of investing $5,000, $10,000 in for this, even if it's just this one lesson, this one chunk, like this one category of my life, it's not even going to change everything. It's just going to fix one thing. That lesson of how to invest in yourself, how to know that taking that step forward, it is a gamble. Every time you open a new book, you don't know what you're about to read. You don't know if it's going to give you nightmares or if it's going to inspire you wildly, but you take a chance anyway. Even if you are just walking into a library and you're trying to figure out which nonfiction or which fiction book to read. You just want to read a nice little story that kind of gets your mind off of things. Whatever type of story you choose is going to have a dramatic impact on what's to come, even if you don't know how the story is going to end. Because either the book is amazing and it inspires you, or it teaches you something about being better at picking books because you're like, wow, I just wasted 5 hours of my life on a terrible book. A lot of the times when we feel scarce in our pursuit of knowledge, when we feel unconfident, when we feel like we don't know enough to move forward, that's actually not about how we feel about our knowledge. It's how we feel about our ability to adapt. Because at the end of the day, there's no way that you're going to know absolutely everything that you need to know in order to open your business or go seek your dream or whatever it is that you're seeking mentorship for. You're never going to know all of those things, even when you're on the other side, because even your mentors still don't know how certain things happened. Even people who have reached and attained certain levels of success, in their own lifetimes, there's going to be plenty of anecdotes that they'll have that'll say, look, I was strategic about X, Y, and Z, but this other variable, Q or F, those were magic. Those were an act of God. Those were not in the plan. They just were miracles that arrived along the way. Unless you are talking to someone who is in a family who has been in business for generations and generations, you're going to have a hard time seeing anything other than what is available in your lifetime. And what I mean by that is, we've got 100 years or so, give or take, maybe more, maybe less, depending on where we're at. And during this time, there's only a finite amount of information that we can pull in. However, there's an infinite amount of work, creation, things that we can do. So how does that equation balance? It seems like it shouldn't logically balance, but it does. And the reason it does is because we simply work better as humans when we are connected and together than we do when we're alone. Studies have even shown time and time again how isolation chambers only do good for us if we're feeling stressed and want to be away from people for maybe a few minutes. Not even an hour, by the way, an actual isolation chamber. By that point, you start talking to yourself and you feel a certain type of way. So we are naturally, even those of us who are introverted, even those of us who get tired by people, we all still need something in order to finish connecting our dots because all of our energy has the answers together. Ultimately, when we take responsibility for what we need to learn, what we need to do, and what we need to do to avoid what we don't want to experience again, the best thing we can do is, number one, take a nice deep breath with me and remind yourself that you are worthy of investing in no matter the cost. Because at the end of the day, what is life? We are trying to figure it out while we're here. We're trying to figure out what it means to appreciate, what it means to create, what it means to feel and connect. At the end of the day, I'm always saying at the end of the day, and I also recently heard the phrase at the beginning of the day because that matters too. But so important that we're not getting so lost in the details that we get in the way of our own learning. Another example of this, let's say that there was a topic that you wanted to learn something about, and then you had a terrible mentor, or maybe you didn't have a terrible mentor, but a friend had a terrible mentor. So you've heard the story. So whether this is firsthand information or secondhand information, either way, your view of learning about this topic from people in your area isn't good. I'll give an example. Let's say you live in a small town and there's not a lot of people who are very great at teaching your particular style of MMA that you love, or whatever martial art you enjoy, right? And so you're like, oh, well, I've lived in this town for 10 years, and the one guy who teaches karate specifically teaches it so bad, so now you have a weird taste in your mouth about karate. And then you go to another town and you already started learning, I don't know, judo or something. So now you're in some other town and you look at this other karate studio, and even if one of the world's best karate instructors lives there, you have a hard time maybe taking that class, even if it fits perfectly in your schedule and it's right next door, and it's actually better because there's no judo in town, so you have to look for something new, right? But now you have that thing tainted in your head. Now that teacher that made you feel that way is becoming one of your greatest teachers, because they are showing you that no matter who or what gets in the way, that doesn't mean that information flow should stop. Whatever it is that your heart is trying to get you to get more information about, or whatever dream you have that you're trying to figure out what that next step is, I know that there are people out there who can potentially, engage in fraudulent behavior with your business. And I want to mention that when you have more experience, this happens less. So don't fear. Yes, have a healthy awareness to ensure that you're not being ripped off. But it's also important that you understand and recognize, should this occur to you, number one, that doesn't make you stupid or less worthy or anything. It could happen to anybody, but it does make you wiser, because now that type of fraud will never happen to you again, or that type of credit card scam, or that type of fake contract. I've heard of people who, long story short, I heard a story of someone who had spent tens of thousands of dollars on essentially getting marketing assets created, not just for the branding of their company, but also for their website and newsletter, all the things. And they ghosted all of the money was sent and no product, no assets, nothing was created for this company. So they didn't even open their doors yet. They didn't even have revenue streams going yet. So they couldn't come back from that at first until they got another loan. So this caused them to feel so scared with making any other economic or financial decisions that they took longer to hire people. They took longer to get all of their ducks in a row to be able to expand to the revenue streams that they had previously talked about. So it's not that, not being open will cause things to never happen. You're not going to miss out forever, but it will delay things if you are scared of investing in yourself and learning from moving forward through that experience. Can you imagine, let's say that happened and then you were like, you know what, I'm never doing that again. I'm just going to learn how to create a website. So now you're spending the next year learning a brand new skill. You're not even focused on your business anymore because you're focused on something else. And now you're missing out because you are scared to find that next person. I mean, it's the same thing with dating, right? If you have your heart broken once, does that mean that you just are going to give up for the rest of your life? Are you going to get back up on that horse again and go ahead and find your person? All of these things all come together. So I don't want you to be scared. I know that, especially in the age of AI and what's out there, what's real, what's not, there can be a lot of uncertainty. So I'm going to leave you with the end of this episode with a couple little pieces of intuitive compassness. That's not a word. I'm just going to give you 2 techniques basically that I like to use that help me understand intuitively what's going on in a situation. Number 1, if it comes to a physical item of any kind, I simply hold it or think about it, write about it, hold on to that. I hold it close to my heart, literally, and I close my eyes and I take a nice deep breath. And if I am leaning forward at all, I know that I'm into it. If I'm leaning backwards, I know that I'm repelled by it and it doesn't make me comfortable. I also know the feelings inside of my gut when things don't feel right. So you need to start listening to your body and seeing what types of cues you have for your intuition. Now that works very well for some things. Other things, when it comes to the less tangible, can be a little bit more difficult to pick up on your intuition sometimes, which is totally normal, perfectly okay. So what I always recommend is get everything out that you absolutely possibly can, whether that's in a voice note, whether you have to write it out, whatever it is that you need to do, get it out. And if you feel like there is a problem or something that needs to be solved with it, just get all of the potentials out. Then you need to stop, set a timer for 10 minutes and go do something like a chore you're not normally into. I really like to, for example, this morning I had to go pick up a bunch of sticks because it was very windy outside. In this process, you're so busy, constantly moving. This should be something fast, right? This shouldn't be something tiny. It should be something that you're kind of getting your heart rate up a little bit, right? So with the sticks, I had to bend over, pick it up. I'm constantly doing little squats to get them all picked up. If you're doing dishes, if you're doing laundry, something where your whole body is moving. So whatever feeling, you can now just go do that task, sit with the feeling and ask yourself how that feels as you're moving through the feeling. You're not allowing your thoughts to wander to something else. I'm not asking you to dissociate in these 10 minutes. I'm asking you to simply go do some other task that you don't have to think about, that you can just do while you are sitting, feeling. You're not writing anything else out, but then you complete that task. You've got the wiggles out a little bit more. If you need another task, if you need another 10 minutes, cool. But when you arrive to the other side and you start to feel something different, whether you went from anxious to excited, or you just went from anxious to more anxious, or you went from anxious to fearful, pick up on whatever that is. That's going to help you understand, because when you're doing those automated movements, sometimes it's a little bit easier for those of us who have kind of a lot going on in our heads to silence the noise and really focus and hone in on the one that matters the most. So if you're listening to this and thinking, I need mentorship, I need guidance, I have some openings right now. I'm accepting one more retainer client this season. So if you want some high-level support, someone to be in your corner to help you strategize and move forward with your business, or just your general non-alc project, this is your chance. Go ahead and send me an email, hello@marinamars.com, and we'll get the conversation started. If you are looking for a group program, we have room inside of our Discovery Phase Launchpad, and this is absolutely for you if you're just starting out, if you're figuring out your niche, your market, or your business plan. And of course, Bula Boss is also open for those of you in the general non-alc space if you want to build strong, sustainable, profitable businesses inside of this industry. And this program basically shows you how to do it all the right way. If any of this sounds like what you need, again, send me an email, hello@marinamars.com, and I would love to have a conversation with you. So that's it for today's episode. If this resonated with you, please share it with a friend, post it on your stories, tag me. I'd absolutely love to hear your thoughts. As always, keep going, keep learning, keep building. If you need anything, just let me know.